Well, hey everyone. Today I'm going to do something a little bit different. I am going to do a little bit of a comparison between the good old Benelli here and my son's Grom. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the differences, and then I'm going to take the Grom out for a ride. I've ridden the Benelli quite a bit. You know, I got about almost 4,000 miles on it, so I think I know that bike pretty well, but I haven't ridden the Grom barely at all. I've taken it a couple of times, so I'm going to take that out, take it for a ride, and talk a little bit about what I think the difference is between the Benelli and the Grom. My Benelli is a 2018, his Grom is a 2017, so there's a year difference between the two, but I don't think that makes much of a difference because that's Benelli just came out. So, but they're both pretty much stock. My son does have pro tapers on his. I don't have any modifications done on mine. Neither one of the two bikes have any performance modifications. Everything is stock, from the exhaust to the intake to the gearing. All of that kind of stuff is the same between the two, or I should say stock between the two. One of the differences between a Grom and the Benelli is the Benelli is 135cc 5-speed, and the Grom is 125 cc's 4-speed. That's the big difference between the two. Obviously there's other differences in the way that they look. The Benelli has a higher seat height. It's probably a good 3 or 4 inches higher than the Grom. The Grom is a little bit lower of seat, and you sit a little bit closer to the ground. The Benelli, the actual fairing here, sits a little bit further back than the Grom. The Grom actually is a little bit more forward on it, so your knees don't get quite as smushed up against it. So that's one of the differences between the two. It's not hugely noticeable, but it is. The exhaust on the Benelli goes up high like that. The exhaust on the Grom actually goes low down below the rear foot peg. So that's another difference between the two, just in their stock form. My son has a set of Maxxis knobbies on his, because he takes his Grom off-road quite a bit. So that's another thing we're going to be trying out, and we're going to just kind of see how the knobbies feel as compared to just street tires on the two, on the Benelli. So that's some of the major differences. Like I said, the major thing is seat height, 5-speed, 135 cc's on the Benelli. Lower seat height, 4-speed, and 125 cc's on the Grom. Now the rest of it, when I go out and take them for a little test ride, that's going to be pretty subjective. That's going to be based on what I feel is the difference between the two. I've gone out riding with my son quite a bit, so I know kind of what the Grom can do and what the difference is, but I haven't really ridden it that much. So we're going to just take it for a ride and we'll talk about it. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to put up the Benelli, we'll fire up the Grom, and we'll take it for a ride. Alright, so we'll see you in a minute. Alright everyone, so now we are on the old Grom, the Honda Grom. This is my son's 2017 Honda Grom. I decided to take it out on the dirt roads here. He's got these new knobbies. He's got a set of Maxxis on them, the Maxxis knobby tires. So I thought, well, why not? Let's give them a little try on the dirt road here. See how they hold up. And they're doing pretty good. They got quite a bit of traction. It feels a lot different than my my Benelli. We are going to go pretty easy since it's not my bike, since it is my son's bike. Oh, I forgot he's got those knobbies on. I can go right through that wash. So one of the things that I noticed already is just your sitting position. It's a little bit different than on the Benelli. My knees just don't feel like that they're crammed in there. I have a little bit more room to sit a little bit more forward on the bike. So that's a good thing. Get a little more leg room. My knees aren't knocking into the tank, or into the fairings, I should say. They seem to be pretty good. One of the other things that's a little different on the Grom versus my Benelli is the tachometer is digital on this one, whereas on the Benelli I have an analog tachometer, which, you know, it's neither here nor there, but it's just what you get used to. The whole gauges panel and everything seems to be a little bit further away from you. It seems to be a little more tucked up in versus the Benelli. The Benelli seems to be sitting up a little higher up in here. Don't have to quite, I actually have to kind of glance down and move my head to actually read the speedometer and tachometer and stuff, and with Benelli I can just literally keep my eyes forward and just move my eyes and see it. So a little bit of a difference, not a big deal, but a little bit. My son mentioned that before I got on it with these tires. These tires are literally a day old, 2 days old. On his bike, that it kind of tracks a little bit different than a smooth tire. The knobbies kind of make it want to move around a little bit, and I can feel that. It's nothing horrible, it's just different. They're a little bit louder than just the stock tires, but not by much. You can hear a tiny little hum coming out of them, but nothing unreasonable, nothing that would, you know, cause you to say, ah, I hate these things. They actually feel pretty good. They ride pretty good for a knobby off-road tire. The Grom is actually very comfortable. The seat, very nice. You know, I had my seat modified, I had additional padding put on my Benelli. I'll show you a picture. But because the back end of it was, you know, poking into my tailbone if you sat too far back, this one here, it doesn't have that ridge, or the two separate pieces, so the ridge that's in there, it's just one continuously smooth seat, so it's actually pretty comfortable. And the one thing I like as well is that my knees can sit up right up to the tank. It seems that the fairings are pushed quite a bit more forward on the Grom than they are on the Benelli, so that's one thing. Now the seat height doesn't seem to bother me. My legs are a little bit more bent, but not by much, so that's not too unreasonable. Alright, so what we'll do is we're going to bring it up to the end of the block here. We'll get off and we'll talk a little bit about some of my thoughts about riding it and how it feels. Alright, let's get off and talk just a couple of seconds about it. So I kind of like the Grom. It's nice. Compared to the Benelli, you know, I could say I could go with either one. Some of the pluses that I think with the Honda Grom is the fact that the fenders are a little further forward. I don't bang my knees into the outsides of the fenders. It's a little more comfortable from that aspect to ride. The seat's nice. Now that I've modified my seat on the Benelli though, so my Benelli's got a little bit more cushion than the Grom does, but the Grom ergonomics is pretty nice. You do sit lower to the ground, so my knees are a little bit more bent. Not by much, not where it makes a huge amount of difference, but they are a little bit more bent. The Maxxis tires that he's got on these things, they're great. Went for just a very, very short off-road. I'm not much of an off-roader, but very short off-road, and they handled nice. You could actually tell that there's quite a bit more traction on them. On the pavement, on the regular road, they rode fine. Like I said a little earlier, and my son mentioned that as well, is that they do track a little bit. But I think that once they kind of get worn in and worn down just slightly, I think that'll be a lot less on the road. There's a small amount of vibration from the knobs on the tire, but it's barely noticeable. You really have to think about it to notice it. So not a bad thing at all. It cornered well. It didn't seem like it was going to slip out. It didn't seem any different than riding on normal street tires. So what can I say? You know, one or the other. There's some pluses to the Benelli. The higher seat height, the 5 gears. Talk briefly about that. I do kind of feel that the Honda Grom has a little bit more, I don't know, get up and go, I guess you'd say. The fact that it only has 4 gears, it seems to take off a little faster and you get up to speed a little quicker. With the Benelli, you're shifting right away from, you know, first to second. Just even getting off the line. So is that extra gear worth it on the Benelli? I think it does have some value when you're up in the higher speeds, having that 5th gear. The Grom seems to run a little bit higher in the RPMs when you're in 4th gear trying to go fast than the Benelli does. The Benelli seems to bring the RPMs down a little bit when you're up in 5th gear, so that may be a little bit of an advantage. The Grom has one big thing over the Benelli right now, and that's aftermarket parts. There is a boatload of stuff you can do to the Honda Grom, and it's really inexpensive stuff. Just to point out a couple of things, my son has the Pro Tapers on. I guess you could put Pro Tapers on the Benelli, so that's not a great one. He's got a little rack on the back there that he snaps on a carrying case for carrying his helmet, groceries, whatever he needs to do. There's tons of different exhausts. For the Grom, you can get sub cages, you can get engine protectors, you can get 12 bars, you can get a ton of stuff for the Grom. I mean, there's literally everything you can think of for the Honda Grom out there right now. Not so much for the Benelli. There are some modifications that you can do for the exhaust, and you know, there's a cam, things like that. So there is some of that stuff that exists, but not as much as there is for the Honda Grom. Alright, so I broke one of my own rules and I went out without a spare battery, and my battery ran out. But I'm back, I got a new battery, and we'll just talk a little bit about my last final thoughts on it. I do like the Honda Grom. It's nice. Is it better than the Benelli? I'm not sure. The verdict's kind of out. I don't think it's any better. I think it's different. Like I said before, the Benelli's got 5 speeds, so it's got a little more top-end speed. I think the Honda Grom's got a little more pickup off the start. Since it only has 4 gears, it's geared a little bit different. The Grom is slightly more comfortable to sit on. The low seat height I don't necessarily like because it makes my knees bend a little bit more, but you can tuck them up behind the fender a little bit better, so that's actually a plus. So would I trade my Benelli for a Grom? No, I don't think so. I think we're going to stick with the good old Alice. The Grom is a great bike, feels nice compared to the Benelli. I think they each have their strengths and they each have their weaknesses. So I hope that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea. If you got some questions, please put them down in the comments below. Be happy to answer them. I think we're probably going to do another video, do another comparison. What we'll do is we'll take this thing off-road. I'd like to give those Maxxis tires a little bit of a workout. I do go on dirt roads when I come into my house here, but not much. So I'd like to take them off-road on some of the trails and see how they actually function. But we'll do that another time. So anyway, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed, please go ahead and do so. Give me a good old thumbs up. And we'll see you next time.